And our opening words this morning are by Margaret Kelp. As surely as we belong to the universe, we belong together. We join here to transcend the isolated self, to reconnect, to know ourselves, to be at home, here on earth, under the stars, linked with each other. Come, let us worship together. And this morning's prayer comes from this little book called Bless All Who Serve. So in honor of Veterans Day, I'm choosing my prayer from this book, which was put together to particularly give out to soldiers so that they could keep it in their pocket. And it's a collection of prayers and readings that represent our UU values. But because it's for a pocket, it's really tiny writing, so excuse me. Eternal God, Mother and Father, Spirit of life, we are grateful for the companionship of hearts and minds seeking to speak the truth in love. We are grateful for our heritage, for the women and men before us, whose prophetic words and deeds make possible our dreams and our insight. We are grateful for the gift of life itself, mindful that to respect life means both to celebrate what it is and to insist on what it can become. May we always rejoice in life and work to cultivate a sense of its giftedness, but may we also heed the call to transformation and growth. May we find in ourselves the strength to face our adversaries, the integrity to name them, and the vision to overcome adversity. May we honor in pride the heroines and heroes of our past, but may we also keep company with the fallen, the broken, and the oppressed. For in the dazzling of the noonday's heat and in the star-studded shimmering of night's rich blackness, we are they. Amen. Our reading this morning is by Rachel Naomi Remen, entitled Sanctuary. My cat Charles, who is 18 years old, has many hiding places. When he is in one of these, a subtle change comes over him. No longer is he vigilant and wary, assessing the environment for its potential threat. In his hiding place, he seems at peace and unafraid. These places are many and varied. Some are classic feline sanctuaries under the bed, behind the drapes, in the closet. Others are unique to the house we share, the nook under the stairs, or the place behind the television. But one of them is in plain sight, a spot on the living room rug. But when Charles is in this spot, he draws about himself the usual inviolateness of all his other hiding places. In full view, he is calm and relaxed. He is himself. He seems so safe there that watching him you would think that he is alone. In a book about Spain, I remember reading about an interesting thing about bullfighting. There is a place in the bull ring where the bull feels safe. If he can reach this place, he stops running and can gather his full strength. He is no longer afraid. From the point of view of his opponent, he becomes dangerous. This place in the ring is different for every bull. It is the job of the matador to be aware of this, to know where sanctuary lies for each and every bull, to be sure that the bull does not occupy his place of wholeness. In bullfighting, the safe place is called the querencia. For humans, the querencia is a place in our inner world. Often it is a familiar place that has not been noticed until a time of crisis. Sometimes it is a viewpoint, a position from which to conduct a life, different for each person. Often it is simply a place of deep inner silence. One of the meditations I have done with people with cancer, says Remen, begins with the suggestion, find a safe place. A man newly diagnosed with colon cancer once told her the following: I never got into the exercise because I could not find a safe place to begin. I looked everywhere. I imagined myself in my home. I imagined myself trout fishing. Nothing helped. In the midst of this, I realized that this sort of searching was familiar. I've been doing it my whole life. I began to feel desperate. In the end, he said, I imagined myself a little boy in my mother's arms. This last helped. Slowly, I began to feel calmer, to get quieter inside. And when at last I felt safe, I suddenly knew that the arms around me were not my mother's, but my own. The place of safety is inside me, not outside where I have been looking all my life. All those hiding places, all those achievements, it's inside me. That's why I never found it before. In working with people with cancer, says Remen, I have seen the change that happens when a person finds their querencia. In full view of the matador, they are calm and peaceful, wise. They have gathered their strength around them. The inner silence is more secure than any hiding place. There ends the reading. How do they expect a man to do the things that I have done and come back and be the same? The things I've done that I regret, the things I've seen I won't forget, for this life and so many more. And I'm trying to find my way home. The child inside me is long dead and gone, somewhere between, lost and alone. I'm trying to find my way home. And I have seen another side, another slice of the pie that didn't seem too fair to me. People who did not deserve the suffering that they incur. Freedom ought to be free. I'm trying to find my way home. Whether we lose or win, I'm so sick and tired of the spin. I don't think I can take any more. If the truth must stay in disguise beneath all the lies, then what were we fighting for? I'm trying to find my way home. Trying hard to keep a smile, look into the eyes of my child and tell him why Dad has to go. And after Daddy's went away, he's come back and he ain't the same as the man that you used to know. I'm trying to find my way home. Sitting here with time to kill, staring out my windowsill, trying so hard to forget. In time I may forgive myself, but history repeats itself and burdens my soul with regrets. I'm trying to find my way home. And lately it's occurred to me it's hard to fight an enemy that lives inside of your head. To spend my life in between the sleepless nights and the bad dreams, I think I might rather be dead. And I'm trying to find my way home. The child inside me is long dead and gone, somewhere between, lost and alone. I'm trying to find my way home. This week leading up to Veterans Day, I've been thinking so much about the meaning of finding our way home. I'd already picked that sermon title when I came upon that amazing song, written by an American veteran of the war in Iraq, Jason Moon. It's an amazing song and so true to the experience of so many veterans that other soldiers experience a certain feeling of homecoming just hearing it, a sort of coming home to their own experience. Many have said that they feel like they wrote the song themselves. It's hard to experience all the things that a veteran has experienced and come back to a home that hasn't changed because they have been changed. And so it's hard to find the way home. You're probably aware, it's been in the news a lot lately, that the Veterans Administration is overwhelmed. They are still dealing with supporting a generation of Vietnam veterans, and now they are inundated with Iraq and Afghanistan veterans as well, many with significant trauma in addition to injuries. So far, the VA has formally diagnosed over 207,000 Iraq and Afghanistan veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder. And the unfortunate reality is that faced with an overwhelming number of veterans to care for, the VA has been seeking some shortcuts in that care. Shortcuts in the form of medications, often very addictive opiates. The Center of Investigative Reporting found that in the last 12 years, VA prescriptions for hydrocodone, oxycodone, methadone, and morphine have gone up 270%. Medication has become a substitute for face-to-face therapy. Jamie Beavers says that he was given opiates by doctors in Iraq for pain, anxiety, and fatigue so that he could stay on duty. But when he returned home, he no longer qualified for the drugs. Too late. He was already addicted. He was never tested for or diagnosed with traumatic brain injury, so he was never offered therapy or any other treatment. He found an illegal drug supply out on the streets. 3 weeks before he was due for another Iraq tour, Beavers was discharged from the Army after having tested positive for drugs. Back home in Philadelphia, he stumbled into the VA Medical Center and asked for help, and he got it. He was diagnosed with traumatic brain injury and PTSD. Counselors helped him win a 100% disability, and he began counseling sessions. But like many other veterans, he found the VA itself was overwhelmed. I was being seen 4 times a week, then 3, then 2, then once every 2 weeks, then once a month, because they had such a caseload. I felt like I got thrown to the back of the bus, he says, and that threw me into a bad depression. I didn't know where to turn for help. Seeing that drugs are not the answer, or not the only answer at least, more and more attention is being paid to a holistic approach to helping soldiers find their way home. An approach that includes spiritual care, as well as physical and emotional care. Just one of the organizations doing this work is Warrior Songs, Inc., a nonprofit founded by Jason Moon, who wrote that song. It brings hope and healing to veterans through the creative arts. Through a variety of programs, Warrior Songs uses the arts to assist veterans and civilians to better understand the war experience. Their mission is to transform buried experiences and feelings into art that educates, motivates, and inspires. They believe that helping those who have experienced war to express their struggles deepens their self-awareness and leads to a more purposeful existence. Processing chaos into stories and setting these stories to music or expressing them through other media fosters communication and helps bridge the gap that often exists between veterans and their loved ones, and between civilians and veterans. It is so hard to come home, and it is our responsibility to ensure that we give our veterans support during those hard homecomings. I also want to recognize this morning that veterans are not the only ones who struggle with homecomings or finding their way home. We all do. We all work hard to find a way to be at home within ourselves, especially after difficult things happen in our life or we've experienced big life changes. We all work at finding that feeling of safety and a spot where we can view the world from a place of wholeness. Luann Fulbright, a Kripalu yoga instructor in Virginia, says, when we're at home with ourselves, we're fully embodied. We feel grounded, well, peaceful, and self-accepting. We're less likely to worry. We're not overly concerned about what anybody else thinks or says that isn't loving, kind, or helpful. When we are feeling far from home or self because of trauma, loss, or stress, what are the landmarks that get us back to self? The other day, I attended an all-day workshop for UU ministers called Preaching by Heart. It was a sort of double entendre meant to address both preaching from the heart, as in heartfelt, and preaching by heart, as in no manuscript. I was all about the first meeting and wanted nothing to do with the second one. As I shared with the group that day, there's nothing about me that wants to do this. When we broke into small groups, each with a different topic, I chose the group that was talking about spiritual practices. I figured that the only way I was even going to be able to attempt preaching by heart, which we had to do later that day, was to find that safe space within myself from which to begin. What I loved most was the list of spiritual practices that they handed out. I liked it because it affirmed for me some spiritual practices that I don't think are always given credit as spiritual practices. Here's the list: singing, chanting, being silent, reading poetry, reading sacred scriptures, meditating, praying, memorizing and repeating a mantra, journaling, worshiping, doing yoga, dancing, tai chi, forgiving, being present, paying attention, breathing, being in nature, walking or hiking, participating in a sweat lodge, playing sports, serving, helping others, volunteering, offering hospitality, listening to music, creating art, looking at art, fasting, being grateful. In the workshop, we were advised that the first step is knowing what feeds your spirit. So I jotted a few other things in my margins: building altars, being with children, looking at the ocean. If you don't already know what feeds your spirit, they said, spend some time figuring it out. And keep an open mind, you might be surprised. The next part is committing to doing that practice on a regular basis. Start by doing your chosen practice every day for a week. Make it easier for yourself by doing it at the same time every day, first thing in the morning or at lunchtime or before you go to bed. One of our modern UU theologians, Tandeka, gives this great advice. She says, "You need to have a spiritual practice that is so simple to do that it's actually easier to just do it than to feel bad about not doing it." How about that breathing one? Breathing is a spiritual practice, and it's pretty easy. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. Thich Nhat Hanh says, "It is possible to come home to yourself and perform small miracles every day in breathing, stepping, brushing our teeth, and drinking tea with awareness." Having a set of spiritual resources can make a huge difference when processing trauma and loss. But they are also useful in the face of everyday stressful situations. I used to commute more than 3 hours a day. The hardest part of the commute for me was 11 stops on the Orange Line in the morning. I was commuting with hundreds of thousands of other people, and some days it felt like all of them were in my train car. I felt claustrophobic with other bodies pressing up against mine. Sometimes I needed to escape in order to survive the ride. This was years ago, but I tell you what, I would come to Provincetown in my mind. I'll tell you where. I would come to the Bayside Beach in the East End, down by Bullring Wharf. I would transport myself back to a day when I was sitting there in a beach chair, my toes in the sand, a book in my lap, listening to the slapping of halyards on a small sailboat tied up just offshore, watching the sun shimmering on the water, and listening to the waves softly lapping at the shore. It was such a peaceful moment, and so vivid. Vivid enough that I could carry it with me for when I needed it. The visual meditation was accompanied by slow breathing, and I could feel my body changing in response to this practice. My tight chest relaxed. My breathing slowed. My whole energy changed. It got me through a lot of mornings. And I still use that visual meditation when I need it. It helps me to return to center, to come home within myself. A lot of things that we do here at the meeting house are like that. Little things that help us return to center. We light a chalice. We sing Spirit of Life and other familiar songs. We have a moment of silent meditation to quiet our minds, and we wait for that chiming of the bell to come back to our surroundings a little more present than we were before. We breathe. We find, either here or in other places in our lives or within ourselves, our own querencias, places of wholeness and safety. I'll end with a story. Anne Lamott tells this story about a little girl getting lost one day. The girl, who was 7, ran up and down the streets of the big town where she lived, but she couldn't find a single familiar landmark. She was very frightened. Finally, a policeman stopped to help her. He put her in the passenger seat of his car, and they drove around, up and down all the streets, until she finally saw something she recognized: her church. She pointed it out to the policeman, and then she told him firmly, "You can let me out now. This is my church, and I can always find my way home from here." Friends, this is your church. May you always find your way home from here. Amen. And blessed be.